What's up everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Terran School. Today I'm going to be teaching you guys a mass bio TvZ opener, which means that we're going to skip the Hellions, we're going to skip all the random starport units, and we're going to go straight into where everyone wants to be, mass marines. Maybe with some tanks and stuff later on. But yeah, this is definitely a different opener from normal TvZ. I think a lot of you guys will be interested in this, so that's why I decided to do this video. Now, basically what it's going to be is normally, you guys know, you go with a 1-1-1, you get the barracks, the factory, and the starport, and then you start playing bio after that, you add your barracks and stuff. But now we're pretty much going to go straight into a 3-racks, going to do a marine pressure, and then from then on, obviously, we'll be adding some factory units, like some tanks and medevacs, but it's mostly the opener that's important. Now, I think this build is very good against cheesy Zergs in particular. That's the main reason I wanted to do this guide, actually, because I feel like there's not a lot of builds that people are aware of that are just generally safe to do. Like 3cc, Hellion, Banshee is maybe like the best build, but you can still die to this all in, that all in. Maybe it's not that good against fast mutas, blah, blah, blah. And I feel like this build is really good all around against all of the weird builds. In macro games, honestly, it's not my first choice. You can definitely play macro games from it. This build was actually popularized by Cure a while ago when he beat Sarah on a best of 7 using it almost every single game. So it definitely has potential. But for me, for macro, it's not my first choice, but I think it's very good against all kind of weird openers you can do. Now the first important step, I just paused it here to not miss it, is that you actually go for a reactive first. No Marine first, no Reaper first, you're actually going to go with the reactive first. Of course, as always, if you guys want to watch the replay slowly in your own time and your own speed without explanation, I'll pop the replay into the description so you can download it from there, sorry. But yeah, I'll be going through it a little bit faster. Now, the only important thing here so far to note is the reactive first. I think with this build you don't even really have to SCV scout, but I don't know. I feel like I SCV scout every game, it just feels good. It costs you a little bit of money, but just simple stuff like knowing if your opponent's playing hatch first or not is already fantastic. Then after this is one thing I do, by the way. This is not a 100% necessity. You can actually adapt with this. I personally like to cut from gas after making the reactor. And with cutting from gas, I mean is that I always saturate my minerals. So I'll have 16 out of 16 on the minerals. Excuse me. And then I start rallying back into gas after that. This is not actually something you have to do. I just like getting my barracks and stuff a little bit faster, but you do delay the follow-up with this a little bit, so you get your tanks a bit later and stuff. So this is just something you'll have to decide for yourself. But my version anyway is to cut the gas, get the barracks out a little bit faster. And that way, also hit slightly faster with your marines and stuff. So you can see here, always keeping 16 out of 16 on the command center. And then I'm just rallying back into the gas and the excess SCVs that I have. Now this is a little bit of a sneaky SCV movement. Once again, you also don't necessarily have to do this, but what I like to do is hide the SCV somewhere to scout for the third later. Because it is definitely possible that they don't go for a third. And an important thing to note is even if this build is good against weird strategies by Zerg, it's kind of hard to deal with stuff if you don't know that it's coming, right? Like if a Nidus is coming, and you have a ton of marines, which is good, but you're not aware. You could be out in the middle of the map and you still get caught off guard, right? So I always like to scout for the third anyway. Now, I'm actually playing against Bly in this replay, and I did this build against Bly like 10 times in a row. So he started looking for my SCVs. I very much doubt that they will be looking for your SCV though. So even hiding it here or anywhere just to scout for that third will be good. Then the next step, obviously, after the reactor, is just getting 2 more barracks. Gonna go straight tech labs on those. And one thing that's important for me is that you always have the perfect saturation. So you see, even after making the gas and stuff, I will not resaturate more than 16. Instead, I will just send those to my natural. I feel like if you do a build that relies on any kind of fast timing, you always want the maximum amount of units. So if you can't teach yourself to get that perfect saturation, as you can see, 16 minerals, 3 gas, rest to the next base, it's just going to help you out. And in my opinion, it's not that difficult to do. It's just something you have to mentally keep track of for the most part, right? Now, Stim obviously goes first, followed by combat shields. Now, one way I like to split my marines here is that I keep 4 on the low ground. And this might feel like a random number to you, but the reason I keep 4 is because anywhere up to 6 marines can still be a different build if you see someone has 6 Marines, he could be going for a 6 Marine 1 mine drop, for example, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be 3 racks. So I keep 4 on the low ground, and then I have 1 Marine to spot for the Overlord in the main, and 1 Marine to spot the Overlord in the back. In case you guys weren't aware, this is actually a pretty popular Overlord spot to fly it back into the main of 2k atmospheres, and then go up from there. So I have 4, and then 2 spotting for the Overlord. So if the Zerg is aware of all the Marines I have, he should see 6, and no more than 6. As soon as it's more than 6, it already becomes suspicious. It will be any kind of Marine pressure from that point on, if the Zerg reads properly. It could be a 2-on-1, it could be a 14 Marine drop, it could be 3 racks, right? So really try to not show any more than 4. Do definitely try to keep your Marines, your excess Marines on the ramp though, because it's possible if the Zerg sees that you're on a relatively high Marine count with no Hellions, that they could try to make 20 speedlings and link flood you. And in that case, you do need these close by. So links come in and you can back up with these immediately, right? Then at about 4 minutes, you want to start adding your extra gas, as you can see. Now, you can actually decide which is easiest for you. In this case, I took 1 in the main and 1 here. Sometimes I also take both here. It's totally fine. Like in a lot of my own games, I apply a little bit of mind games, and I knew this Overlord was here, right? So I didn't want him to see that I was making 2 gases over here. I mean, in this case, he can only see this one, and that's perfect for me. Because, you know, I feel like Zerg in particular is a lot about theory. So there are going to be a decent amount of Zergs that will read things just by the numbers. Okay, he has 6 Marines, 4-minute double gas. It's probably this, right? So if you can avoid any kind of scouting, any kind of intel, then that's always really good. And the factory is going to go down after that. A very important thing for TvZ always, of course, is to wall this off. And that's why this timing is important. If you forget 1 depot here in the wall, you already have to make an extra depot. Because as soon as you don't have a wall against Zerg, 20 links are going to run in and you could lose super fast, super easily. So always make sure you get this wall down. eBay after the factory. Another important thing that I want to note is it's the same with upgrade timings. Like if you want to attack at 1-1 or 2-2, you always have to move out before those are finished. I feel like this is really simple, but people do forget it about a little bit. If I would wait for stim and then move out, then, you know, my army is going to be stronger while I'm walking across the map and nothing's happening, but it's not very useful. As you can see, stim is going to finish and I'm already pretty much going to be at the opponent's base. This is what your push wants to look like. It's about 25 Marines, I believe. Let's see. 23, seems like. And this is the most crucial part of the build. This can go a lot of ways, okay? I think if you guys are going to do this build, you're going to run into an unprotected Zerg a lot of the time. There's going to be a good amount of times where you would just kill the Zerg. But if the Zerg does it properly, they're going to stop at like 45 drones. As you can see here, Bly stopped at 44. And they're going to spam units and they will be able to overwhelm you. So you do want to be careful. One trick I like to do is I like to save my last scan, which is usually at the natural, before I go. So I can scan the mineral line here. Now Bly here is actually being very aggressive. Which is good for me because this is off creep. But what I like to do is scan the mineral line to see how many drones there are. And if I see that there's really too many drones, which would mean that Zerg is like 50 plus, then I like to commit. Otherwise, I just like to force units and actually back off. Like here, I saw a lot of units by the Zerg. I saw that he didn't have an absurd amount of drones, even though it is, yeah, it's just a good amount of drones. And that's why I went to back off. And the thing is, you know, this looks bad, but fighting off creep with this many Marines against pure Ling is actually fine. As you can see. If there were like any Banelings there, it would be dangerous. So if you see Banelings with your scan, I would also back off. But this is definitely something that's probably gonna, or that is gonna need the most practice from you guys. Because this moment in the build is super crucial. You don't want to overcommit. You also don't want to let your opponent get away with greed. So this might be the most complicated one. And I think it's going to depend a lot on MMR, to be honest. Like, if you play at 3k MMR, I could totally see your opponent just having mass units and no drones, right? If you play at 4.5k MMR, maybe they're all super greedy and you can kill them every time. Like, you're just going to have to scout well and see how your opponents do. I do definitely recommend saving that scan before, because one scan is so telling. You'll be able to see Banelings morphing. You can even see very subtle things. For example, if you scan and you see drones rallying down, you know the Zerg is still making drones and you can probably go in, right? So the scouting is very important, but this part might be a bit tricky for you guys, for sure. Then back home, the follow-up is pretty simple. or actually, the add-on situation might be a bit complicated. You made the factory, if you remember, before moving out. Then you're just gonna make medevacs from that, right? So you're gonna make the starport and you add the reactor on the factory. Then this is also important. You need to sacrifice one of your tech labs for the factory because you want to get a tank out for your follow-up push. Like, you don't want to be making this tech lab on your own. It takes like 20 extra seconds, I believe, 23, whatever the build time of a factory is, and you don't want to be spending that. Besides that, you don't really want to be making a ton of Marauders against Zerg, usually. Not until the late game, at least. And what's really cool about this build is that it has a really nice follow-up to Marine tank pushes. Like, normally, as Terran, you have to hold back a little bit more in the mid-game, and then once you get your upgrades going and your mines, you go out. This build goes into tank pushes very fast. As you can see, tank is already done here. And normally the push you do, actually, just to explain you guys what my most common game with this is, how it flows, is that I back off with the Marines. Like, in this case, I traded them, right? Like, you can see, insane trades, double the value. But the most common situation is that I back off with my units, and then I have a really strong Marine count for the next push. And then these two medevacs would bring over the tank instead. And, like, you know, it depends on what the map you are, but every map is gonna have good spots for tanks. You could put it here when you push this base, or here behind the gas, you know, anywhere really. And one thing that you have to keep note of as well is that walking tanks across the map is risky. So if you play this kind of style where you're not playing with mines, you're not playing with Hellions, you're just going with Marines and tanks forward, you usually want to reinforce by loading into your medevacs. Like, as you can see, I'm not sending anything across. All my reinforcements, at least until a certain point, are going to be from medevacs. Like, I don't want to let this wall down. I just want to load into my medevacs and go with them. Now, obviously, once you lose your first Marines, which I did, you're not really pushing anymore. Like, this is more harassment, and I found, like, pretty much an undefended Zerg base, right? For the most part. But yeah, if you do keep those Marines alive at the start, you are going to be able to do a strong push. Otherwise, you're just going to send drops here and there. Now, the follow-up to this, like, it's pretty much, I say follow-up a lot because it's pretty much a series of attacks, right? If you do this build, you go first with the 3x attack, then you're going to follow up when you get your first tank. And then something really interesting that Cure did back then is that he actually switches to Liberators at some point. I think I was making them but canceled them because I lost my medevacs at the front. If I didn't lose those medevacs, I would have made some Liberators. But at some point, you are actually going to make Liberators. And you're going to try to whittle the Zerg down by playing Marine Tank Liberator. Now, you could transition into mines from this, of course. Like, especially in this case, like, I did a lot of damage already. Like, I'm pretty good. But for the most part, it just flows really well to play Marine Tank into Libs from here. Like, your Marine count is high very early, so you actually have a bit more micro ability. Normally, if you do one of these pushes, it has like a bunch of Hellions and like very little Marines, and you know, you kind of hope that you're gonna shoot the right stuff. But here, you always have a lot of Marines, so you can just push straight on. Tanks, Liberators. Here you can see the Liberators are coming. There's also another version to this, which could be important for you guys. If you're not confident in attacking and macroing at the same time, because it is a little bit of that. It's not. I would say this is not the most multitasking intense build, and the reason I say that is because normally you're going non-stop and you have to macro at the same time. But this build, it attacks in waves, and then in the downtime you can macro. But still, if you think you're gonna struggle with transitioning with the macro and stuff, you can actually do a 2-base all-in from this as well. It's actually not bad. Instead of the 3rd command center, you can just go 4th and 5th barracks, add reactors, and really just push with those 9 Marines, tanks, you know. I think I forgot one of my upgrades this game. Maybe this feels a little bit late. We'll push with +1, push with 1-1 even. And that could actually be a really good follow-up too. I've actually won games with that before. Can confirm it's legit. Actually, I'm pretty sure Percival beat Rogue with that in the GSL as well. I think it was Percival at least. So definitely a build that can beat any Zerg. Yeah, here you can see that follow-up as well. And also, you can totally fall back with this. Like, it's kind of misleading how weak the economy is, because you're pretty much always doing damage to the Zerg, if not direct, indirect, because Zerg is just forced to make a lot of units. Like, if Zerg defenses perfectly, all game long, they're gonna be ahead, for sure. Like, but I think because it's so hard to defend, because it's so hard to read how many drones you can really make and how many units, Zerg is always gonna have a relatively weak economy as well. Like, this game actually makes it look stronger than it is, I'll be honest. I only killed 6 workers, and my opponent is on 49 drones, which is an absolutely tragic Zerg economy, right? So this game is actually a really good example of that, where I don't get me wrong, I did do a lot of damage, I killed the base, but I actually didn't even kill that many drones, and I'm still so far up in workers, because Zerg just needs to keep producing units, and it's so hard to read for them sometimes. And then this seems to be a pretty killer push as well. Now armory goes down, double eBay. Once again, guys, I know I went through it really fast. I didn't show all of the builds. So please, if you want to look at the build slowly, download it from the description so you can see it. And if you guys forgot how to do like these marine tank pushes, let me remind you guys quickly. I actually did this in a Clem POV analysis a while ago as well. If you play marine tank against Zerg, you don't really want to YOLO across the middle, kind of like with you could do with mines sometimes. But you always want to go to the edge and find the last base. For example, I killed this base. Instead of pushing here on the creep in the middle, I walked all the way around to get this position again with this base. And you just want to deny the last few bases. And yeah, once again, I'm going to add on to the part what I said about reinforcing with medevacs. Even if you're not necessarily reinforcing with medevacs at this point, because you're building liberators, you don't want to rally your units across with this. And I think in general, you don't really want to do that with in TvZ, I mean. But the reason why you especially don't want to do it is because marine tank does not have the potential for unlimited efficiency like mines do. Like if you have a few mines on the defense, they could potentially kill 1,000,000 units. Marine tank is very straight up DPS, nothing crazy. Like no way an insane amount of units is gonna die. So if someone does a run by with 50 links and you only have a tank and 7 marines at home, you will take a lot of damage from that, right? So if you play marine tank, you really do not want to just rally across, but you want to attack in waves instead. Like you can see here, I'm keeping everything at home. I mean, this push looks like it's gonna end the game, but if it wasn't, I would back off a bit, gather up my units from home, and then push again, like in waves. Kind of like the entire, it's funny, it fits well. Kind of like how the entire build goes. First the 3 racks, then the tank push, etc, etc. That's kind of how you play marine tank in general as well. Anyway, that's going to be it for today's guide. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Make sure to leave a sub and like. Leave me a comment as well. Ask any questions, of course. And I'll see you guys next time. Adios.